Implementation Committee meeting to order at 1:01 p.m. Supervisor Bury, are you okay with us starting back with number 1 just to check in with Sheriff Bartlett, and then we can move back on to where we left off?
Yes, I think that's a good starting point, Supervisor.
Okay. So Sheriff Bartlett, we talked about the buffer mode, and the end of the conversation, the idea came out to maybe compromise at a 60-second buffer, and you were going to check in with some of your teammates and then come back to this meeting with a potential answer to that. So I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I think we're still in between the 60 and 30 seconds. There's a variety of different opinions and ideas, whether, and I know we're going to get into each of them in depth, but whether to go back and look at stuff, whether as far as the time, whether to go back and allow people to actually review footage. And you can make an argument on either end. You can make an argument on, well, so many police departments do allow them or do go to the 120 seconds. And the flip side that, they don't allow it, or they do allow it, and they also have 30 seconds. So I'm still sitting on the fence on that one. I got to
feature depending on the circle.
On the system that you have, whether some of our cars are data 911, some of our cars will have Axon in-car camera systems. If it's an Axon in-car camera system, the minute it's activated, whether it's light bar, gun rack, speed, G-force, if they're in an accident, back door opening, there's a whole bunch of different triggers, as we call them, to automatically activate the camera on your body as well as the camera in the car. That's if it's a full Axon system. If it's integrated between data 911, which is what we have now in all of our cars, then only this will go on when you manually activate it.
Okay.
Sure, I don't want to get too far afield, but I just want to ask this one question before we move on. In regards to the body cameras, do we have any other apparatus, meaning like you just alluded to, the car or any kind of gun sights or drones that will sync with our body cameras?
Yes, I'm being corrected right now. Cap, jump in. Captain Bragg.
Yeah, so we did install a device called the Axon Signal in every one of our marked police cars. The Axon Signal sets off, is based on triggers, inputs. That's the light bar, accelerometer, crash sensor, gun rack. Any of those signals will activate any body camera within a close proximity of that patrol vehicle. So to answer Supervisor Bury's question, the body cams will turn on automatically under some preset circumstances, including other police agencies who have the same Axon Signal devices, which the state police have installed already in their cars. Additionally, they're also going to have the Axon holster and the Axon taser, which when they withdraw their taser or their firearm, that will also trigger the body cameras automatically.
So the reason why I asked this question is, and I'm glad you brought that up, that you have all these other devices that will link, is as we're going through and doing the policy, again, I don't want to get too far afield, but I want to make sure we address this. As we're developing a policy for our body cams, if we're going to get into linking other devices, and I'm now talking more like drones and things of that nature, where we're getting into public surveillance, we definitely would want to have a policy for that. We don't want to rely on any company's policy that's going to dictate how these things are synced and how we use them within the community. And I understand we're talking about safe communities and policing. Sure that we're thinking about the public first and surveillance. As a citizen, I don't want to be surveilled, under surveillance any more than anybody else, especially if I'm doing nothing wrong.
Seems reasonable to me. But it sounds like the body camera is going to go on. It could be on for several minutes before we get a scene. Correct?
Could be. But the reason why I was bringing it up, Supervisor Bury, is the Axion, and I was looking at some of the data. All their devices, if you choose to do so, will activate. And so if they have a drone or something in the air and it's not within the vicinity, it will activate and surveil, do a surveillance, whether I'm innocent or not. And I, if that's the case and we're going to implement that kind of stuff, we need to make sure we include that in our policy.
Is Shane Zoney here? Or anybody from the DA's office?
Well, I'm here. I'm not from the DA's office. I don't know. If
Oh, Mr. Zoney. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Zoney, question for you. So the drone was automatically activated. Its camera was automatically activated, and they happened to pick up something several miles away, totally unrelated. Where's the probable cause for making that tape? That kind of a thing. I don't think we're at a point in our society where we just go looking at tape to see if somebody did something wrong, are we?
The drone's not, just to make it clear, the drone is not activated by the Axon system.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so that kind of.
But I would love to hear that answer. I still would like to hear the answer.
Talking about me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's. Go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Well, what I can say is we're pretty much surveilled anytime we go out our house nowadays. I mean, that's just how it is. Whether you're talking law enforcement or technology.
Yeah, but if you had,
that's not. I'm sorry, Supervisor. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mr. Hughes.
I was gonna say that's not the answer to the question, is because these are purposeful devices, right? And so whether we're surveilled going out the house or not, I mean, that's something we can address. But our sheriff's department or law enforcement in general are deploying, these technologies, and we don't have a policy, right? And we want to know the ramifications of such technologies if they are ever deployed. Right now, the sheriff said we don't have the drone that's connected, but what if it is? So I would like to have a clear answer to that question if you have one.
You need a search warrant to look inside a house. You generally, or in certain circumstances, you need a search warrant to look inside a car. Anything that's out and about that's just observable, to the naked eye, there's really doesn't implicate probable cause issues.
Right.
An example, I think, I don't know if they still do it, but the state police used to fly planes just over fields looking for marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to give a precise answer on that because it's kind of a general concept, but I mean, you have the whole issue of search and seizure is based on someone having an expectation of privacy. The strongest place where you have an expectation of privacy is in your home. Mm-hmm. Then a car is a lesser expectation. When you're just walking down the street, the police have to have some reason to come up and talk to you.
Really?
I know in New York City.
A police officer. I'm sorry. So
go ahead, Mr. Zoney.
Sure. A police officer can come up and talk to Denny to say hello. They're human beings like we are. It all comes into play whether or not that initial encounter turned into something more that results in some sort of evidence, or what they set forth as evidence of a crime. In certain circumstances, how that initial encounter occurs, does not occur, that can have potential issues in court. But, if you're outside,
it makes sense. What you're saying also makes sense, Mrs. Zoney, because you think about it, they have cameras on street corners in New York City and in the subways, and most of our buildings, stores have cameras. So, they've been doing this kind of stuff for many, many years. But I do appreciate what Mr. Hughes is concerned about. If the sheriff's going to start using that in drones, this might be a little bit different, but he said that they're not.
Well, I think, just on a personal level, I have a problem with drones surveilling the population in general.
Exactly, I do.
Yeah. I don't think that's what the sheriff's department is looking to do.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of a byproduct of this device. And I'm not an expert on this stuff. The sheriff knows a lot more about this. I'm learning through these meetings more. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific, definitive answer because it's such a general question.
Okay.
Okay,
Mr. Hall?
for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Does privacy in your home extend to your backyard? I have several acres of cultivated field, and I've seen flights going over, certainly before this just passed. But what are my rights if I'm on my back deck?
I don't think you're in your house, right?
But it's
You're
my
outside.
property.
You're
Yeah.
outside.
On my property, so I'm not protected outdoors.
I don't, I'm not a constitutional law expert, but I don't think so. You are outside of your house. So in order for somebody to see you in your house, they have to actually come up and look inside your house. Someone to see you, in your back porch, while you're outside, they could see it from, passing by, right? Flying by.
So Captain had, a good knowledge of these intertwined, and I think that's part of what Bill is getting at, whether we're there yet or not. Could we find out, and Captain Bray, you might have the answer, you might need to look into it, what gets linked into what? My understanding is if it's, like you said, if the state police are using Axon within a certain distance, yours automatically turns on. If the car has Axon in it, or like you said, you have a device or something that, automatically, even if it's not Axon to Axon, links that in. Like, how far does that reach go? And if Axon drone that wasn't necessarily the sheriff's office and they were looking at their own property with a drone that happened to be Axon, is that going to link in? Like, does it automatically, if it's Axon to Axon, link in, or does it have to be like the sheriff's office and the state police said, we're going to share our Axon devices so that when you push it, it records mine?
So I think this conversation kind of went in two different directions. There's, I believe, maybe a misunderstanding that this Axon device will trigger drone recording somehow, and that's not the case at all. Axon does not trigger any drone recording, and there's nothing linked. The only thing Axon does is take the footage, the video footage that it receives, and it uploads it to a secure cloud where we can view it later. That has to be done, or that could be done with a drone through Axon or any service. In fact, when we fly our drone for missions, we record to an SD card and we upload it to our servers. That's all the Axon evidence.com does. So they're not linked together at all. And the Axon signal devices only will activate other Axon products within approximately 15 to 25 feet of each other. So any drone flying in the air will certainly not be triggered by any Axon signal.
Actually watch the advertisement from Axiom, and they outline their holster, their gun, their
Right.
body vest, and the drone that would be activated within a certain vicinity. Now, what that vicinity is, I don't know, but it was clear that their drones would activate as well.
You're muted, Captain Bray.
I'm sorry, Axon does sell a drone package that will feed their video to the evidence.com server.
Okay.
And that's what Axon does as a service. They will provide you for a fee with one of their drones that will feed their video to the secure cloud storage. That's the product that they offer. We do not have that.
I guess the question for me, and I think this is what Supervisor Bury was starting with, is when does it automatically trigger? If I'm wearing my body camera, under what instances and what other devices that I'm within a certain buffer of, does it automatically trigger my recording versus me having to push the button to say I'm now recording?
The short answer is the automatic triggers will trigger the body cameras, any body cameras within that 15 to 25 foot radius. And what triggers it generally for us, for the sheriff's office, is every deputy is equipped with a body camera. If they're in their police car and they activate their emergency lights, that will turn the camera on. So that could mean that the camera's on 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes before they even arrive at a call.
Okay, thank you. So, unless anyone else has something on this buffer, I think that we'll table it to our next meeting, Sheriff Bartlett, because it seems like you're kind of between 30 seconds and 60 seconds. And my notes from last time said that it was definitely agreed to that it would be audio and video, and we're really just coming down to what that from it recording, whether I push it or my lights activate it, how far back are we going? Somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds, and you'll continue working on your side with that?
Yep.
Okay.
And I actually just sent the union rep a text also.
Okay. Great. So the only person that wasn't on the meeting last time was D.A. Chaika. D.A. Chaika, do you have anything on how? Oh,
Just real quick too, audio is not on the recorder. Audio does not go back. It's only video.
so the last time I did ask if it could be audio and video, I thought you had said that yes, it could be.
Louis, jump in.
There's settings that we can do the buffer to include audio and or video, and we can adjust the time amount, whether it's 30 seconds up to 2 minutes. The standard is 30 seconds of pre-record video only, and that's what we currently operate on.
So Sheriff, are you open to doing audio? Because I think that's really important to also hear what's happening. Again, I used the example before, if someone said she has a gun, and that's why I, as an officer, respond the way I do, and it doesn't pick that up. I thought we had agreed to that last time. Are you open to doing audio and video for whatever the time frame is that we determine?
Next meeting.
Okay. D.A. Chaika, you weren't at our last meeting, and before we move on to number 2, did you have any input from a DA perspective as far as how far back the buffer zone is from when the recording is activated?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Anyone else on number 1 before we move on to number 2? Okay. So we were talking about number 2 is prohibit officers from viewing body camera footage of a critical incident before making a sworn statement. I had an idea of a little bit of a word change that I think might be more conducive to what Sheriff Bartlett is looking for. If we talk about just use of force incidents, so we're not talking about, a traffic stop or other areas where, there could be, not a lot that we're looking to use, but if there's an actual use of force incident, and D.A. Chaika, I would love to also hear from you on this, because we heard from PD Zoni, that the officers in a use of force incident only would have to make their sworn statement before watching the recording, at which point, if they then watched the recording after that sworn statement and had, an addition to make or an amendment to make, they could certainly do that, being clear that, after watching the video, I'm amending my statement in this way or that way. So does that work better to talk just about use of force incidents when we're talking about not watching the recording ahead of time? Sheriff Bartlett?
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you, I'm probably against that. Again, you can go back and forth between agencies do allow it. Some agencies don't allow it. As many that are throwing out of that don't allow it, they do allow it. So it's, I welcome anybody. We've got a new use of force simulator at the college. I welcome anybody. They want to go down and be involved with that, and then try and tell me, and over those last couple of minutes that you dealt with it and that you're trying to remember, in stressful situations, it's extremely tough. And I know that we would have the best possible written reports to the district attorney's office so they can prosecute the case. And when you're asking people to just say, hey, what do you remember, when they just had a traumatic incident happen to them, there's probably not, if there is, there's probably a very small percentage of people that are actually on this call right now that can say they've been involved in a very extremely severe and serious traumatic incident. I'm looking at one right now on here. I know he's been involved. I've been in the middle of them. And when you're asked to now go back and say, okay, what happened? I'm still for them going back and being able to review it.
So Sheriff, this isn't an attack on the sheriff's department or law enforcement. What we're saying is, just like when someone is being prosecuted, you know, they too don't get to go in and review a film, right? We're saying let's have them get their statement, then review the film, and then go back and if they would like to retract or recant or make an amendment to it, they would have that opportunity. But I just see it as being fair, really.
And I think, too, as a matter of public trust, I think a lot of citizens might feel better if there's a written report before anybody has a chance to look at the video and maybe change their story. And this is, again, not to say anything negative about our particular department, but, you know, stuff happens. And I was going to ask, too, do citizens get a second chance? You know, people in the witness stand get a second chance. And I'm not sure that's so.
I would like to add that, you know, just for an awful hour somewhere in the past, you know, people had to write reports without looking. But I would imagine that if it ever did reach the stage where trial or even, you know, preliminarily, you know, in court, those kinds of questions would be asked, and defense attorneys would ask the question, did you look at the video before you wrote the report? You know, and then the officer would have to be in the position to explain why, you know, that kind of a thing. So I'm not so sure, you know, where I come out on this kind of a thing, but I do believe that, you know, all of that stuff is going to come out anyway, if they did it. I myself don't see anything wrong with limiting it policy to saying that they should not look at video before writing a report when there is a use of force. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not the one making the ultimate decision here.
At the end of the day, too, if they review their reports, it's giving you a true and accurate thing of what happened there. I am on, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, I got a red light flashing.
We can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what it is. So, you know, I'm still leaning towards that. You got to be able to give the best report you can to hand over to the prosecutor. And it's one thing to say, well, then if you want to go back and change your reports, don't go back and change reports, because then that. Sure, Mr. Zoni can add on this whether he wants to or not, and I got a lot of respect for Shane, known him for years. But now all of a sudden, if I've got this report saying one thing, and I got this report saying another thing, now when I go on the stand, the public defender is going to be saying to me, or the defense attorney is going to be saying to me, trying to discredit me, which one is it?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Sheriff, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But if you don't have a policy that says one way or the other, then he's always going to be able to do that. He's going to get one of your guys up there and he's going to ask, so before you wrote this report, is that your testimony under oath that you actually did not look at that video, or you did look at that video? Okay, so if you did look at the video, why did you have to look at the video? I could see these guys having fun with it all day either way. You know, I'm just saying it's not going to be an easy kind of a situation.
Right, but
I think it's important too, like Mr. Hughes said, you know, does the defendant have that right? Do the victims or witnesses have that right? So if I was potentially committing a crime and there's police there and there's use of force happening, my nerves are going like this. So then I get interviewed as to what occurred, what happened. Do I get to sit and watch the video before I make my statement? Because why would one get the right and not the other? And then if I see something different and I come back and say, well, I meant to say that I did that, you know, just like the PD is going to have a field day with the officers, the DA is going to have a field day with my statement. Like, look, she said she did this, but actually the video shows she
different. These are different, Tistria, because, you know, that body camera footage is available for the defense as well. You know, so you are going to be able to take a look at the video, and if you made a statement without your counsel there, it was under, you know, I was confused, whatever. Here's the video that they took themselves, so it is a tool for both parties. Okay, you know,
right, we're talking about applying it different, right? We're talking about allowing the police to have free access prior to a statement, whereas if I'm on the other side of the law, or potentially on the other side of the law, I wouldn't get to see that until after my statement.
I understand, Mr. Hughes. I mean, how many times have we seen cases thrown out on a technicality because somebody
Yep.
said something the wrong way or wrote a report the wrong way? And it would be a shame that if somebody had committed a rape, that they got off. They really did do it, but they got off because of a technicality like this. You know,
Right.
I think that you have to make sure that you preserve the evidence as well. You
Right,
know,
but
for
that's why-
the sake of the victims, there were victims too.
I totally agree that we're victims. I'm certainly not arguing for the criminal. I'm arguing for fair justice, right?
Yeah.
And it needs to be equal across the board. And the example that the sheriff brought up is that we would have the contradicting statements, but we don't have a policy, nor do we have body cameras in place right now. And I'm sure over the course of the history of our sheriff's department and other law enforcement departments, we had police officers change their statements based on what they said when we didn't have the technology of body cameras. The thing that's sticking us right now is we have new technology that is allowing us to move forward with new policies, and so we need to think forward, not think of try to compare it to our old policies.
I dominate the conversation. I'm going to let somebody else speak, but I do want to add this at this point. And that is that if the policy that is going to be developed here is that a deputy can look at a report, at a video before with a use of force incident involved, right? The defense attorneys know that. So they automatically have the ability, when they put that deputy on the stand, to start that line of questioning. Did you look at that video before you wrote the report? Okay, so they could do the voodoo they do automatically because the sheriff's policy is they will allow them to do it in a use of force incident. So that kind of levels the playing field too, right? You're giving the defense something right out of the gate, right? If the sheriff's office said, no, we will not allow you to look at a video when it involves a use of force until after you wrote your report, and there are footprints or whatever we call them every time there's a video and a supervisor has to sign off on it as well, right? That's different. But if their choice is to go ahead and let them do it, like I said, you're already giving the defense something that they could work with.
And I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll pass it off because I'm also dominating the conversation. But let's just say, and I'm not saying this is the case with our deputies, but let's just say that my statement was going to be a certain thing that included some information that then I watch the footage and I say, oh, that wasn't caught. I'm not going to now include that, right? So I think there's a risk when they watch it first of that statement getting catered in a way, because the video camera is not going to pick everything up that occurred, right? Especially let's say it doesn't end up having audio. It's not going to include what I might have said to that guy that, I think it's important to make a statement with no other information like they currently do. That's what they do right now. And then say, okay, now you can watch this extra tool that we haven't had in the history of you being a police officer. And if there's some amendments you need to make because now you've seen it and you were shaken up and you forgot that this important piece of information was there, I think it's really important to get that initial statement just like we currently do. We're not taking anything away from the officers. That's what they do right now. They make a statement based on how they remember the situation.
And what's in their notes.
Right, and their notes. And then if the video contradicts that in some way, then they have the ability to go and say, you know what, I was shaken up, I forgot about this thing, or it actually happened this way. I do see hands raised, so I'll stop dominating. But I do think it's really important that we have one initial, like we currently do, statement based on their notes, their recollection, what they do, and then if the video somehow adds something to it that they want to add, then they of course could have the ability to do that. Sheriff Bartlett.
One thing people got to remember who we're sitting here fighting for too, and that's the victims of these crimes that we're out on. And don't you want to have the best possible information being forwarded? Hold on. Sorry.
Sheriff,
you want the best thing for the video, for the
I
victim.
do, but I don't like the implication that I can't speak for anybody else but myself, that I'm not fighting for the victim, because I've been in many trenches where I've been fighting for equal justice in the victim. What I want to see is an equal system across the board, and then let the judicial system operate the way it's supposed to operate. The other. That's what I'm arguing for right now.
Captain Ray, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo a couple of things that I've heard. And, for years and years, police officers never had the ability to review recordings because the technology didn't exist. When we started 20, 30 years ago, we relied on our recollection of the incident, the notes that we took, and we went back and wrote those reports sometimes hours after the incident took place, relying on those notes we took. We now have the ability to use technology to assist us with writing those reports, i.e. the body-worn camera video footage. So I don't look at this as like a case of where, we're being given an unfair advantage to write a fair report. We've always done this for the history of police. We're just now going to use technology to make sure that our reports are as accurate as they can be, as we've always done in the past, doing it by hand with handwritten notes. So nothing is changing, allowing the police officers to review their body camera in advance. It's just that the technology has caught up with it where we can do that. And we do it on a regular basis. We do it on DWI stops where, we're trying to focus on our safety and the road and cars going by. And we go back and review those videos afterwards to see the clues and what step they went off the line, things like that. So the report is accurate. It's based, we've done that forever. So nothing is changing with body-worn cameras. We're just simply using newer technology to do what we've done for many, many years.
So,
Captain, I believe this is just focused on use of force incidents, not the other issues, okay?
But it would apply the same to
It's just use of force is what we're kind of focusing on now. Mr. Hughes?
no, thank you. That's what I was going to bring up is when we're talking about use of force, and I would welcome that for the other incidents.
Dave Hall has his hand raised.
Yes, I think you guys from the Sheriff's Department have demonstrated very clearly how useful it is to you, but I think we want to balance that with how useful this video will be to citizens, whether they're accused of a crime or they're witnesses. As Bill has said, a witness doesn't get a chance to sort of amend their statement. And a person is going to be traumatized by being just a witness, not just a victim to an incident. So I think we need, as much as we all care about the victims, of course we do. That's huge. But we also want to make sure there's good justice for those who are accused. And as Bill said, I think we should make it as level a playing field as possible.
Gary Graziano, as a committee member, we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything to add?
Let me see if, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, I was just trying not to be redundant because I happen to agree that they should be able to review those prior to writing a report. I think it was Bill Hughes last meeting, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, where you said that you weren't for I gotcha policies.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, that's what that policy would be. I've been close to situations where you're in the middle of a riot, knives, pepper spray, on and on and on. There could be 4 or 5 situations during an incident that you're not going to recall perfectly. And Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, that's your open game with a defense attorney finding so many things that could be not perfectly time-wise in a report opposed to what the camera actually says. So I think it's an I gotcha policy. I don't agree. Shouldn't be able to review that. The word amend keeps being used, but I don't know what can possibly be amended because when you're reviewing the footage, you can't amend anything. It is what it is. And that's what your report is going to say. I saw Mr. Hall send in several policies in regards to other areas that don't allow the footage. I'm just curious, as far as this committee goes, are we trying to create a policy that is effective for Columbia County? Or are we looking for policies that are from Honolulu? I'm a little confused at what we're trying to accomplish here, because I can come back next meeting and give you another 40 examples of where they are allowed to look at the footage. So I'm just looking for some direction of how we're going to make some of these decisions. We all have our own opinions. We're all entitled to them. But how are we going to make these decisions? Are we simply going to give them to the sheriff and everybody's different opinions and correspondence? Just give me some clarification there, if you would.
So,
Yeah.
if I could, I just want to address. So Gary, when I was saying, gotcha, I was referring to the whole policy when we were talking about police stops, traffic stops. You're right. That would fall along the line of gotcha. But when we're talking about use of force, it's a specific, not all the time occurrence, where it is pivotal that we have critical information on both sides of the ledger. And we need to make sure that it is equal for both sides of the ledger. And in regards to policies and how we implement them, the sheriff makes the policy. I think we're a recommendation body only. And you know, if we can't bring expert testimony in, and have other experts talk about this, then I see where people are. I haven't done any research outside of Columbia County, but I see where other people have to show what other counties and other towns are doing. I think that's the substitute for the experts that could possibly come in.
And just to follow up on that, Bill, you said that you're looking for equal justice on both sides.
Correct.
Looking at that body is going to give you all the justice you need. Whether
Wow.
it's viewed before, after, in between, the body camera is not going to lie to you.
Yeah, but that's subjective, Gary. That's subjective.
So, Gary, to answer two of your questions, first of all, I think at the last meeting, if you recall, when we got to number 2, part of what I took away from it from the sheriff was we can't do that. And the reason we can't do that is it would completely mess up the prosecution. So I think, and Dave can speak for himself, I think this list wasn't saying we should be Honolulu. But when we don't have, you know, the sheriff is an expert in many things, but body cameras are new. So none of us can say we're experts in body cameras unless we've had a lot of experience. That's what makes you an expert. So, you know, my understanding was at the last meeting, the answer to number 2 was like, we can't do this up every prosecution. It's going to throw all the cases out. So then to come up with a list that says, well, we can if we want to. Here's a lot of other communities that do it. I don't think it's saying we should be Honolulu. I think it's saying actually it is a possibility. If we choose not to do it, there are certainly places that choose not to do it, but it's not because we can't do it. We certainly can. Then it's a decision of do we want to or not. And so, you know, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning, which is in instances such as body cameras where we don't necessarily have an expert in the room and we have, you know, the sheriff representing one perspective, Dave as a member of the public representing one perspective, you know, we have all these different perspectives. But if we did invite an expert in body cameras into the meeting, then the question's like, not should we do this? It's not a should question. It's a can we? How does the Axon work? How does it, you know, auto correct? What are the instances where it does that? Could get answered. Right now, it's just a lot of us in the room, we have different opinions, and we certainly, you know, it sounds like Captain Bray has a lot of research, as has Mr. Hughes now, on like what is possible, what does the Axon, you know, allow. But, you know, I think personally that we should invite a body camera expert, if we can find one, into the conversation. Again, not for a should, but just a what's possible. Can we do this? Is this possible? Can we do that? And then your question on, you know, what are we here for? What are we doing? I do think at the end of the day, we are here to have these conversations. Like number 1, you know, we're almost there. Maybe Sheriff Bartlett comes back to next meeting and says, okay, we're going to do audio and video. We're going to do it for 60 seconds. Whereas before the implementation committee sat down, the answer was we're doing it for 30 seconds and we're doing video only. Now there's more perspectives, there's more conversation, and it might end up in a different place. But we're certainly not here to tell the sheriff what he's going to do, because policies are made by the sheriff's office. But I think we're here to have larger conversations with different perspectives, because just like Sheriff Bartlett said at the beginning of the meeting, you know, there's 2 different sides on this. They both have some valid points. And so is there a middle ground that we can find that's going to work for our county? So that's my answer to those questions. Speak to the other cities that you brought up, because that was directed at you.
Yes, I've never been to Honolulu. It was not a means of I didn't mean to compare us, but as Tistra just said, there are jurisdictions that have said, hey, we're not going to do this. And I just wanted to sort of point out a few that had. And again, just to reiterate this idea of sort of juxtaposition of victims with vulnerable communities, with the law enforcement in the county. Obviously, we're looking at Columbia County, and we want to do what's right for Columbia County. And I have huge respect for the sheriff's department. My limited dealings with them, they've been very, very professional. I've been a victim of crime myself, so I don't lack sympathy for victims at all. But I also really want to feel like we have a great weight on our shoulders here. We want to do what's best for the community and all segments of the community. And it's been a national issue, and it's been enough of a state issue that the executive order came down that we were supposed to do this. So I just want to make sure, from my point of view, that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that everybody in the community, law enforcement, the majority, vulnerable minorities, are feeling like they can trust law enforcement, they feel safe, and that there's respect on both sides. And I think that was a big point of this executive order, was to foster respect and a sense of safety between the communities. So I'm just trying to keep that foremost in my mind.
And I have one other point to that. I mean, I think is that, I was a legislator for a long time, and when we passed legislation, while I was sitting in that chair, I was expecting that legislation to hold water and for it to be honored. Well, how long was I going to be able to sit in that chair? And it's the same thing with our sheriff. I trust Sheriff Bartlett to do a great job and to protect us in Columbia County. Well, how long is he going to be sheriff? When we put policies like this in place, it's for the next sheriff and the next sheriff and the next sheriff. It's not for this particular sheriff only. And so we need to, and that's why we need to think deeply about what it is we put in place, unless we're planning on convening this committee 5 years from now and amending some of this stuff.
Sheriff Bartlett?
And that's a great point, Bill and Dave, from what you guys are saying. And please don't anybody think that we aren't opening to listening what the public and everybody has to say. We absolutely are. And we've got a lot of great people on this committee, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I can't thank you enough for being on this, because you're taking time out of your day. You got better things to do right now than be sitting here looking at a computer screen. But thank you, because it is important to us to make sure that we are coming along with the times, and that we are working with the public and working with our community. And so, again, kind of like negotiations, I'm going through negotiations in both unions right now. And I do appreciate all of you being here. And it's just, it's a bunch of people getting together and throwing ideas back and forth, and we'll see where it goes from there. But thank you again for being here.
Thank you. And we have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to get to agenda item 2 and 3. But before we move to that, I did want to hear a public defender perspective on the prohibiting officers from viewing the body camera, and I'd also like to hear the DA's perspective. So public defender Zoni, from a public defender's perspective, where would you stand on this issue?
Tricia, I'll defer to the DA since he's been working in his position a little longer than I have.
Okay, DA Chaika?
I believe the more information, the better.
So you're in support of them viewing the footage before their sworn statement?
Well, I'm in support of permitting the sheriff to do what he thinks is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I don't know that we're going to find consensus on this, although
Tricia, would you like me to respond, or?
Yeah, I would love your perspective. I think last time you said, as a public defender, this would be my stance. But I think you're here as the public defender, so I would like to hear that perspective.
Quite honestly, it doesn't make a difference to me. I think some of the members on this call have kind of explained, what the process is, what we do, and one way or another, I'll be able to try to use it to my advantage.
Okay, Great, thank you. Before we move on to the next items, any other committee members? I don't know that we're going to get to consensus on this per se. I think we've had a lot of conversation that is great. I hope, Sheriff Bartlett can hear other perspectives, like he said, try to find, where that middle ground might be. I also don't want to beat a dead horse. So does anyone else have anything else to add to the conversation? Okay. So agenda item 2 is about the correspondence. Did everybody get, there's 2 different emails that came from Sherry. One was a first email with 7 different attachment. Well, it was 1 attachment, 7 correspondence, and then a newer one at 12:45.
Yes, got it.
So I don't know if everyone had a chance to read through all of them. There was certainly some things that I think, we haven't gotten to yet, as far as like tampering with or editing footage, an easy one that we would all be on the same page, but we haven't quite gotten to that conversation yet. I haven't had a chance. I mean, I've skimmed through each and every one of them. I think there was definitely some things about the road and about how some of the members of the public felt about the allowing, police officers to view the information. And I do think both Bill and Dave brought that public perspective to the conversation today of, making sure that we're hearing both sides and thinking about the whole picture. Oh, Sherry, go ahead.
I think there's also a misperception of in some of those letters, there's a misperception, I want to say, or misconception, excuse me, of the fact that these meetings are private meetings. So I don't know how that's getting out there, because that's not what this is. Right. These aren't private meetings. They are public meetings. Yes, public to just speak at our virtual meetings, but we don't have to allow them to speak in our public meetings when we meet in person either. Yeah. So that's another agenda item on there as well. But I just want to be clear to the public who's watching, these meetings aren't private meetings. They are public meetings to be viewed on YouTube, and questions and submissions like they did, can be submitted and we can discuss them. Or you can discuss them. But I just want to be clear that these aren't private meetings, and making sure that people out there know that we're not hiding anything.
That's a great point. And do you mind, Sherry, actually responding to each of the emails with where they can find the recordings of the meetings?
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. And then if we decide to meet in person, which I think we likely will, you could include in the email, meetings in the future will be held at this time, at this place. Great. Dave, were you going to say the same?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm glad Sherry pointed that out, because that was one thing, the impression I got when I read a couple of those emails was, wait a minute, because it was clear that some people looked like they had been attending or viewing the meetings, and others seemed like they thought that they were private. So I'm glad you cleared that up.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sherry. So future meetings starting in August, I know I spoke with Supervisor Bury, and both of our preference is to start meeting in person at 401. Are any of the committee members opposed to moving to in-person meetings starting in August?
Nope.
Okay. And Supervisor Bury, you and I can talk more, but I do feel like if the public comes, it's not just an open conversation with the public kind of chiming in whenever they want, but I do feel, if you agree, Supervisor Bury and the rest of the committee, that maybe, similar to how we're going to open it up to other supervisors now at the end of the meeting, if they have any input, that, we could keep maybe 5-10 minutes at the end, almost like a privilege of the floor, or at the beginning, where we did allow members of the public who came physically to the meetings that might want to share some input with us instead of having to email us. How do you feel about that, Supervisor Bury?
I'm fine. I think it's very productive. I'd like to get the public involved, but I think it can get kind of freewheeling and take a long period of time unless we have some just basic ground rules. And I would like to see it, that commentary be limited to the discussion that happened that day.
Okay.
So if we close the door on last month, we close the door on last month. If we open the door this time, then that could be something that the public would talk about. If we have something for next month's agenda, I would prefer to wait till next month to talk about it.
Okay.
Because we should be using our time. It's the professionals on here, very valuable time, just to take care of the items in front of us on that given day.
Agreed. Okay, so maybe we do it at the end, and since we're not making any decisions, it's not like we're going to have made the decision and then they come and give us their input. Maybe at the end of each meeting, we can leave, 5 to 10 minutes
Sure.
to allow the public to give input that we can then consider, for the next meeting, or Sheriff Bartlett can, take home and consider from there. Sherry.
Suggest then having a clear agenda ahead of time of the topics that are going to be discussed that day, and then that way people ahead of time can formulate their questions.
Yes.
And for the interest of saving time at the end of the meeting.
That's a great idea. I welcome the public input on this whole process, and just because we're 10 minutes of a meeting once a month doesn't mean that the public isn't welcome to contact us. In between, open to being contacted.
Absolutely, agreed. And just as we got the emails today, people can continue to email. Sherry is the best way, I think, to get it to the whole group.
Okay.
And then I did want to, if there's nothing else that's needing the committee members to discuss, I did want to open. I saw a few other supervisors, Supervisor Chimidi, Supervisor Mussman, and we're allowing other supervisors to have any input at the end of the meeting. So I'd love to open it to any other supervisors on this call that wanted a moment to be heard.
Sure.
Can y'all speak? Okay, Becco?
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Chimidi.
Yeah, so just first off, I just want to commend everybody on a great and thoughtful conversation. So I really appreciate how serious you are taking a look at the issue and sort of the different reasons why you might choose one angle or another. I did want to speak to the risks about having officers review footage after a use of force incident prior to making a statement. And I think the risk is that it could erode public trust. And I think, the reason why this sort of bubbled up is that people have seen officers in these use of force incidences basically give a false account of what happened. And, nationally, we've seen this over and over again. And that's the reason, sort of seeing these really horrific outlier cases of police misconduct, I think has sort of bubbled up. And that's the reason why we had a statewide, look at this issue, and how even the justification for body cameras was that it was a product of police reform. And so I think the risk is that we know that body cameras, they don't pick up everything. They're actually not designed to pick up everything. They're not designed to sort of be like the seeing all God eye view. So they actually make the cameras less good than they could be, because the idea is that it's supposed to kind of mimic what the officer sees, so they don't have infrared. So they're actually not designed to pick up everything. And just by the placement, oftentimes they could be blocked. Someone's hands could be in the way. So the things are not going to pick up everything. And then there's some risk that an officer could, I'm not saying that officers will do this, but some officers nationally have definitely done this, right? Where they could look at footage and then change their testimony based on what footage they have. And I think if you have a use of force incident, say where, there's a physical altercation and someone is very badly injured, they're at the hospital, and the public might have all kinds of rumors about what happened. There's drugs and alcohol involved, that there was some sort of corruption involved. And I would think that the investigation, you would want to have an investigation where the officers involved were sort of immediately giving statements to sort of put everything on the record. And that's, I think, what the public expects, is sort of a quick sort of like someone has a statement before they kind of collude with everybody else. So if all the people involved are looking at the footage and kind of coming up with the same story, it's going to look bad. And whether or not they actually come out with a more accurate story than what would have been, the public will never know. The public will just sort of see that there was some sort of collusion. They'll see that the risk there, that it actually erodes trust, and that the body cameras don't pick up everything, or people will argue that body cameras didn't pick up everything because there wasn't a statement. And I think if the goal is to really build trust in these like high profile use of force incidents, we're not talking about like run of the mill policing. We're talking about these really, these high tense situations where there is real risk of public outcry, is that we want to do everything in the best way possible. And I think that's the reason why we want to sort of create this avenue for officers to make a statement, then review footage, then amend their statement, so there's a full picture sort of remaining. And if our goal is objectivity in the fullest picture possible, that's the fullest picture, is that you get a statement without body camera footage where it hasn't been sort of changed. And we know the way people learn and people remember things, as soon as you see footage of something, it actually rewires your memories in your brain. And so the way to get the fullest picture, and this is the way I assume that police investigations normally go, is that you try to get eyewitness statements, and then you supplement that with all the other pieces. So that's why I would recommend we go that route for looking at footage.
Thank you, Supervisor Chimides. Supervisor Sterling or Supervisor Mussman, did either of you want a minute to speak?
Oh, I would just want to second that if we could have agendas and them available to the public ahead of time, that would be great. Thanks, Sherry.
Great, thank you. Supervisor Mussman?
I just think the body camera is one of the tools that is to be used, and I think it's an objective tool and should remain that way without tampering. So thanks everybody for all your input, by the way.
Thank you, Supervisor Mussman. All right, so our next meeting will be on the first Tuesday of August, which is August 3rd at 1 p.m. and we will be at 401 State. Supervisor Bury and I will work up an agenda in advance and get it to Sherry. And Sherry, thank you for sending out the recordings of the meetings thus far, as well as how people can attend moving forward. I assume once we're in person, there will not be an online viewing option, so it might be harder for some people who work during the day. But you will have minutes, right, Sherry, that can go out?
We'll have minutes taken, and yes.
Great.
They're not going to be recording these, right? Going back to the old way we used to do committee meetings?
Correct.
Right. Okay. All right, so it's going to be straight minutes then.
I know, I will miss the transcripts because they do save me a lot of
And
work.
Sherry, do you know, and I can reach out to the chairman, has there been any talk like New Lebanon? So we started using this town hall streams. It's $150 a month.
I was on vacation all last week, so I don't know if they did talk about that. So I don't think so at this point, but
I'll reach out to the chairman because we in New Lebanon have decided to continue that because a lot of people have found that it's really convenient to be able to actually watch the meeting, and it doesn't have to be watched at the time of the meeting, so they can watch it later. And it was very inexpensive. They came and installed all the equipment, the microphones, the cameras, and we pay $150 a month. And we could potentially record all of our committee meetings, all of our board meetings. And there's also some public that still, for whatever reason, isn't comfortable coming in person, or maybe they have an autoimmune and they couldn't get the vaccine. I'll talk to the chairman about that.
We're doing the same thing here in Germantown. We just bought a really fancy camera system. It's amazing. And we're hooked up to, still going to be hooked up to Zoom going forward for our board meetings and our committee meetings. So
yeah,
I think it's valuable also. That's just me. It gets more people involved than we were ever able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should, if we can, continue to have them videoed if possible.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so I'll talk to the chairman about that. Maybe, if it's not a huge lift, maybe we could even get it in front of the full board for our next week's meeting. I don't know the process, but I'll work on that. Anything else from any committee meeting members? All right. Well, we're a minute early. Thank you all so much for your time, and we'll see you on August 3rd at 401 State in person.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Oswaldo, are you all set?